morning. We're Kevin and Julie, as you mentioned. We have been asked to share our experience of faithful and generous giving. We have a need to grow spiritually as a disciple of Jesus through faithful, consistent, planned, and joyful giving. It is in our best interest that we take responsibility for our own faith development. Along with coming to worship each week, we have opportunities to participate in B3 meetings and weekly Bible studies. These activities have an important part to play in our spiritual growth. For Julie and I, we didn't always give first because we didn't know how from a spiritual perspective. We carried around the fear of not having enough to give. So over the past few years, we have felt the calling through our church to do more about growing our faith in Jesus Christ. My wife's example of participating more in church activities outside of going to worship every Sunday has influenced our family together to grow in our faith. This growth in faith has allowed Julie and me to spiritually discover how to put our finances in order. The turning point was hearing the audio version of Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover, a proven plan for financial fitness. This book is faith-based and played a huge role in our motivation to come up with a financial plan. Before, we were clueless of what we were spending our money on, and this drove our fear of not having enough to provide for our needs. We started to put on paper a monthly budget and labeling where and what we were spending our money on. Over the first few months of doing this, it started to make all the difference in the world. We found ourselves being able to defeat fear and overcome self-gratification. We found that by giving more of life to Christ, that our fears began to dissipate, and our aim in life shifted from seeking self-gratification to pleasing God and caring for others. Through this budget, we found that instead of giving what we had left over to God, we were planning our financial obligations around giving first. This has worked out wonders for the growth of our faith in God. As we grow spiritually, we live into the reality that our entire lives belong to the Lord, not just our hearts and our minds, but our wallets as well. Through Christ, we ourselves have a need to give, and this is what brings the greatest joy in life. Julie is going to share a couple of Bible verses that spoke to us about giving to the church, enabling us to perform God's work here on earth.
To be financially free, to freely give. This was the prayer I prayed several years ago, and praise God, He has made this happen. I want to share with you some Bible verses that spoke to me over the years about giving to church so that we can do God's work here on earth. The first one I clearly remember teaching as a Sunday school teacher to third graders, and it really struck me as a key to something important. Mark chapter 12, verse 41 through 44. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything she had to live on." The second was Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 24. "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." Both of these verses make me think of Kevin's grandmother, who lived to be 105.5 years old, and died, we are told, with only hundreds of dollars in the bank. When she was widowed without an income, she told her family that God will provide, and He surely did for many, many years. The problem Kevin and I had all those years ago was we didn't allow God to use us to be able to properly apply these teachings. God has changed our hearts, and God has changed our attitudes, and praise God, we are now being obedient to Him with His resources. We invite you to all prayerfully complete a pledge card, which is either going to be on paper or online, seeking to answer the question, what percentage of my income is God calling me to give, and hand it in on Sunday, November 4th for Generosity Sunday. And then we encourage you to actually follow through with it and see for yourself how consistent planned giving will deepen your commitment to Jesus.